Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. On this week's episode, we look into Operation Gideon's Chariots. Let's get started. Groups of armed men made systematic raids into the Jewish settlements. They would burn the houses and the fields, kill all of the people, and make off with the goods from the land. The Israelites lived in eternal dread of the barbaric hordes. This sad condition lasted for years. In trembling and despair, the Israelites prayed to God for rescue, and again, He sent them a deliverer. No, this is not October 7th, although all of those things did happen October 7th. The difference is, this comes from the Hebrew Bible in Judges 7, in the book of Judges, where the Midianite people were doing raids on the Jewish settlements and killing Jews. Jewish people cried up to God asking for some type of help. He sent a deliverer, known as Gideon. And Gideon and his army went to defend the Jewish people with everything they could in order to stop these raids on their settlements and the burning of their people, their houses, and their fields. It is definitely not an accident that the Israeli army and the government decided to call this Operation Gideon's Chariots, because it takes from the story of Judges when Gideon went to go defend the Jewish people with his army using chariots, and today what's happening in Gaza. It's been a few weeks since I've done an update on what's going on in Gaza, and that's mainly because it's kind of been a status quo situation for the last few weeks. But this week I was hoping to do a mini update on the situation right now. Big things are happening, along with explaining Operation Gideon's Chariots, because that's what's going to be happening. It's already started. And in order to make sure my listeners understand what's going on across the world in Israel right now, I want to talk about this plan, what's been going on, what's going to happen in the future. We'll talk about the good and the bad and maybe what's going to happen next. I'm fairly sure the last time we had an update about the situation in Gaza was when we were talking about the protests that were happening, where Gaza was turning against Hamas. And a lot hasn't changed since then. You have Hamas, who's currently hiding as much as they can in holes in hopes to not be caught by the IDF. And the people of Gaza speaking out very clearly against Hamas. The IDF has taken out some seriously big-name people that are hiding underground in Gaza. Most recently, the other day, the IDF was able to strike near a hospital and kill the current leader of Hamas. Mohammed Sinwar was officially announced to be dead as of yesterday. Even though they were hiding underground, Israel was able to get them. But it's not such an easy thing to try and track down these people who are purposefully staying underneath hospitals, their human shields, and making sure that they never show their face in the light of day. And yet, Israel's taking them out, one by one. But the level in which Hamas will refuse to give up, no matter how many of their people are killed by the IDF, no matter how many civilians are being held hostage by Hamas, they refuse to give up. We also know over the last couple of months that Israel has stopped providing aid through their borders to the people of Gaza. Let's be clear here, they have enough food to last them over 2 months, according to Kogat, the group that sent in the tons and tons of aid. But that amount is slowly running out, and the IDF has to decide what they're going to do next. And lastly, and most importantly, in the last round of ceasefire talks, Hamas forced Israel to allow people to go back north, in the north of Gaza, which we all knew was a huge mistake, but that is part of their plan. In that, for the last couple of months, we've watched people from the south who were first moved for safety reasons go back to the north for Hamas to use those people as human shields in order to go with them and retake places like hospitals in the area, which of course has become a little bit of a problem recently. So yet again, Hamas needs to be cleaned out of the north because they went back with the civilians. That was always their plan on why they needed civilians to be unchecked when they go back north. Need to be moved yet again to go south in order to get rid of Hamas, who went north again. Ironically, if Hamas didn't include this in their ceasefire talks, the requirement to force their people to go north, none of this would have to happen. The people would have been living in the south in whatever displaced persons camps, and Hamas wouldn't have human shields. But that's kind of part of their plan. So over the last few months, Israel has been devising sort of a all-encompassing plan, one that will deal with the aid situation and the fact that aid can no longer go in through traditional means where Hamas steals it all. They need to deal with the fact that Hamas is using their people as human shields again in the north and need to again be moved. And of course, always, they need to deal with the hostage situation, which is the fact that we can't seem to find our hostages. And from testimony that we're getting from released hostages, it seems like it is because the hostages are being moved. Every time Israel gives a command that everyone needs to leave an area so it can be searched, Hamas takes their hostages with them. They go to the safe zone, Israel then leaves, and they go back. It makes it nearly impossible to find hostages when they continue to move. So Israel has finally come up with the official plan, and it's now called Gideon's Chariots. Once and for all, we are going to end this conflict and solve all of the major issues. I want to add one more thing just before we get started on what this is. And I want to add the fact that the international world has essentially not helped at all in this situation, forcing, asking, or demanding, whatever you want to call it, Egypt to open their borders, to create world displaced persons camps in the Egyptian Sinai that could have food and medicine and help and whatever the Gazans need while keeping them out of harm's way. This has never been an option because Egypt and the Arab world, and frankly the world as a whole, don't care. They want to force Israel to have to fight around all of these civilians so they can either stop Israel from killing Hamas or have as many people in Gaza killed as they can and then just blame it all on Israel. The common sense situation here would be to remove the civilians who are innocent. And because the world has refused to allow these people out, Israel's going to take care of that too. So what the IDF came up with is pretty amazing. It's revolutionary for Israeli situations. Typically, what we've been doing for the last almost 2 years now is Israel has been asking a group to leave a certain area. The IDF goes in, clears out the area, puts their people at risk, takes out Hamas, and then they typically will sort of leave that area and move on to the next, thus eventually allowing the Hamas people to move back in with the civilians. And the reason that we need to keep moving them around from place to place is because Hamas keeps going into the safe zones that they're not supposed to be in. So Israel has finally figured this out. They are creating their own safe zone, no longer relying on international aid groups, Hamas, the UN. The IDF is going to deal with it all by themselves, not trusting any more people. According to the IDF, the first thing that's happening currently is that the IDF is going to be going into the south of Gaza, sort of around the Rafah area, and they're going to create a safe zone by IDF soldiers patrolling within that zone and essentially creating a border around this area to not let people in or out. At the same time, Israel is asking all of the Gazans in the north, the ones who just went back after the ceasefire, to head south again to go to this area near Rafah. And I know it sucks. It is awful for the poor people of Gaza who have to keep going back and forth. As I said earlier, had Hamas not forced them to go north, they would already be in Rafah, and this wouldn't be an issue. But unfortunately, they're being used as human shields, and it's an inconvenience to have to move them, but hopefully this is the last time. So eventually, all of the people from the north of Gaza will make their way south into the IDF-controlled safe zone. They will have to go through a checkpoint with the IDF to make sure they don't have any contraband, they are not fighters, they don't have any weapons, and then they will get to go inside this area, which will be managed and controlled by the IDF and aid workers. In this area, they will get food and doctors and medicine, anything they need in order to stay safe. And the most amazing part of this is the fact that Israel, being in full control of this area, can ensure that every single piece of aid that comes through the border will go directly to the people for free that it should, because Israel is going to control the transportation and the distribution, Whereas in the past, what happened was Israel would transfer it into Gaza, drop it at the border, and then Hamas would steal it, or the UN would put it in their warehouses, and it would never make it to the people. If you listen to our earlier podcasts, you'd know that this is part of the strategy. They want people to be starving, or at minimum look like they're starving, in order to play into that ideology in the international world, in order to gain sympathy and to win the war by public relations, not by weapons. So not only does this Gideon's Chariots protect the people who are in southern Gaza from Hamas, but it also ensures they are actually getting the aid that they are supposed to be getting and cutting Hamas and the UN out completely. According to a New York Times report over a year ago, Hamas had made over $1 billion selling the free aid the world sent in to the Gazan people in order to fund their terrorism. And under the new plan, Gideon's Chariots, they won't be able to do this. Their financial gain from this has been completely cut off. Another amazing part of this plan is the fact that this surrounding wall by the IDF gets to keep Hamas out of this region. So not only are we going to see the people of Gaza not being used as human shields anymore, which is fantastic for those people, we won't see Hamas be able to infiltrate the safe zones that they've been doing forever in order to avoid being killed or being arrested. They will no longer get the warnings from Israel saying, please move here so we can come into your area and kill Hamas, and follow the civilians in order to stay safe until they can return back to their tunnel systems once the Israeli army is gone. Something we have seen endlessly in this conflict. This time, they will not be allowed to go into the safe zone because Israel will be guarding that safe zone to ensure they never make it in, which is game-changing, really. The old tactics that they used to use are not going to work anymore. And on that same note, what's even more amazing is the fact that when Hamas tries to move from place to place with their people, they won't be able to bring any hostages with them, which is something they've been doing all the time, according to hostage testimony. So as the Hamas members in the north who may have hostages right now, they will not be able to take the hostages with them to go into the safe zone to hide from Israel, leaving them very much exposed to the IDF catching them and finding the hostages. This truly is a brilliant idea to take away the human shield element of hiding under their people, but also not allowing them to run and take their hostages with them, to constantly be outrunning the IDF and never getting the hostages out. This leaves them entirely exposed. It really seems as though the IDF has thought this through incredibly well and has thrown the rulebook out from every past conflict. And even this conflict for the last 2 years. They have completely changed the game. They are cutting all of the third parties out. They're not going to rely on other organizations to give food, to protect safe zones, to ensure that Hamas isn't moving hostages, and dealing with it themselves. Every part of this operation is going to be dealt with by the IDF and can be trusted, unlike when we rely on other people. And this is scaring the crap out of Hamas. Because, again, this is game-changing. Israel has learned all of the tactics used by Hamas so far and has completely disabled them. So it is absolutely not a surprise that as Operation Gideon's Chariot started the other day, reports are that Hamas, quote, immediately sent people to Doha in order to start talking ceasefires. There is no question that Hamas is terrified of this plan because it really takes on everything they've been doing and neutralizes it. And they are left with no other option other than to beg for a ceasefire in order to stop this operation from happening. Not too long ago on one of our podcasts, we used the words of former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, where he said to a BBC journalist that it is exactly this pressure on Hamas that creates them to go into ceasefires and release hostages. And we're seeing it in real time right now. We're seeing them beg for a ceasefire, beg to release hostages in order to stop this offensive because they know this is the end. And what is now being reported today is that Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire deal. Shocking. Their proposed deal in Doha would see a 6 to 8 week ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for 10 living hostages By the way, this is more than it was under the Witkoff plan before. And Israel will release 200 to 250 Palestinian terrorists. And on day 10 of the ceasefire, Hamas would provide a list of the remaining living hostages, something they were technically supposed to do earlier. You can see the desperation in the fact that Hamas ran there so fast the minute that this operation began, but also in the fact that their desires for the ceasefire have seemingly changed. The amount of people that they are releasing is more, something they claimed in the past they would never do, and the amount of people they expect in return is less. And noticeably missing from this deal is the permanent end of fighting, like Hamas has been demanding and claiming they will not have any more temporary ceasefires, only ceasefires that see the end completely of this war. Obviously, they've dropped that clause out of the ceasefire demands. Clearly, Hamas needs this ceasefire, among other reasons for just their survival, also because Gaza is turning against them right now, as we said on a previous podcast. They can't come out of their holes in order to put down the protests. The next question is, should Israel take this deal? And to that, I really don't know. That is a very difficult question to answer. And I feel genuinely bad for the Prime Minister and all of the people around him who have to make this difficult decision. Because obviously Hamas is just using this as an excuse to delay the clearly very effective plan by the IDF. They need that to stop immediately. On the other hand, Israel needs to get these hostages back. 10 living hostages who are living in complete hell right now could be out, but at what cost? And something that I find very incredible about this whole situation is the fact that Israel is the one who has forced Hamas to come to the table for a ceasefire, and somehow Hamas acts like they're not the desperate one here. Should Israel maybe ask for more? Should Israel demand every single hostage gets out for a ceasefire? Should Israel push on the 250 people being released from their prisons and say, we're not releasing anybody? It kind of seems like they're on the ropes, and Israel could kind of ask for anything because Hamas needs this operation to stop. I really don't know the answer. And unfortunately, it's a very challenging issue when you're dealing with hostage families who want their people home at all costs. And knowing that if we turn down the deal and we go through with Operation Gideon's Chariots, it is possible that Hamas could just kill the living hostages out of some sort of spite. And that is a very big risk. On the other hand, we have the typical ceasefire situations, which Israel will have to move their men back out after risking their lives to take the land they have now, and possibly putting at risk this whole operation, now that Hamas has seen the IDF's official plan and has 6 to 8 week ceasefire to counter their attack. In the end, I don't know what the right answer is here, whether we should take this ceasefire opportunity or not. Thank goodness that's not my decision to have to make. But what we can see here is that Operation Gideon's Chariots is a huge game changer in the fact that we have now finally learned how Hamas operates, and the best minds at the IDF have neutralized pretty much everything that they're doing. They have solved almost every problem. And clearly, Hamas believes and knows that this is going to be the end of them because they have no way out. Everything has been thought through here. So they desperately need a ceasefire in order to stop this mission from taking place, in order for them to have any chance at survival. Hopefully this episode helped you understand better what was going on in Gaza up until now, and how much of a game changer this is, that Israel is now doing such a different thing than it's done almost ever in Gaza, and how Hamas is incredibly terrified of the fact that this is actually going to work. If the IDF chose Gideon's Chariots based on the fact that what happened on October 7th was very similar to what happened during the time of Gideon, they were pretty brilliant. And let's just hope that at the end of this, the outcome of Gideon's 300 men on chariots, when his men chased down the Midianites and made them submit to the Israelites and made sure they will never raise their head again, and the land was tranquil for 40 years in Gideon's time. This is hopefully what's going to happen in Gaza. But God willing, not only for 40 years. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.